Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to MindShifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife Jeannie. Michael and Jeannie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeannie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce.
And the truth that is rooted within me. Hi, and welcome to MindShifters Radio. We're glad that you're with us today. The call-in number is 646-200-4169. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Here we are in cool, sunny Ashland, Oregon this morning. It's absolutely a beautiful day. Some nice white clouds. Unfortunately, there are chemtrails up there, but a gorgeous day. And welcome to everybody. We get the opportunity to share the support of the ancient Aramaic technology that was developed thousands of years ago and disappeared, and here we are bringing it back to the earth. And we're delighted to have the opportunity to share this space with you. Good morning, David and Tim and everybody else that's on the line. How are you, gentlemen?
Good morning. Doing wonderfully well, thank you.
Awesome. David?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. I was just getting another call in here, and I'm slow. But yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're on day 17 of our celebration of Memorial Day, and we've got some special stuff to bring to you today. David's been compiling as a former Vietnam vet. I guess you're not a former Vietnam vet. You're just a Vietnam vet, right? And has put together some information for us to assist in understanding the reasons why we should be celebrating this day called Memorial Day for the 17th day in a row. And our invitation to you is, as you listen to what David has to share, to breathe. Have a stack of worksheets with you if it brings anything up for you, because he's got some, I think, maybe some heavy-duty stuff to share. And what do we need to do in order to eradicate war from the earth? I'd offer that what we need to do is each of us have the willingness to become responsible, to move inside of ourselves. And our invitation specifically is that you pick one issue today that you're willing to work through that contributes to war, and that is an issue that's based in any form of hostility or fear. And as each of us does this, we become the space in which the energy of war is literally just sucked off the planet, just disappeared. And that's our goal. And to me, that is the highest way we can honor those who have been forced to kill or be killed, to be injured, to be maimed, to be emotionally traumatized, and to bring that trauma back home and pass it on to their families and the family systems involved. And so what issue today are you willing to face that you're willing to walk through and be done with? What communication are you willing to open that will bring healing in that regard? So, David, would you like to introduce the thoughts you had for us today and share a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and everyone for being on here. I invited a few people to listen in today, and it's interesting since we began this and since I started talking about doing some research and putting some things together about the different things that it's certainly surfaced for me, and how would I explain and talk about this issue with folks. And after watching the Berinsky movie the other day and getting a clearer idea of how the non-being mind operates and how it is operating in the media, how it operates in the government, so forth. And I thought, is this going to be that I want this show to be about more of giving statistics to people about what is going on, or is this about supporting people and waking people up to the fact that there is something that we can do about it as an individual, and are we willing to take on the responsibility for it? Is everyone's I view it as everyone's responsibility, as you talk about, Michael, that to do an individual work as far as the healing and the violence and the rage and the non-being mind. And there's so much information about this, and I was concerned about giving information that was less authentic. And the problem with that is that the system is set up so that there is no authenticity to the numbers. As an example, if you go to the website of congress.org, there's several articles on there, and that's what I invite people to do, is to read some of this information and see what it is that resonates for you, and then from that, take a look and see what it is that you can do in order to resolve any issues that you may have around it. For the statistics and the numbers, I'm reminded the numbers are numbers, and as I'm reminded about a friend of mine that was in dental school years and years ago, and they were doing research on chewing gum, and he was in the dental college, and they needed to do, and one group of them they were dentists, and they were to come up with validations of chewing gum, and the other half of the group was to come up with validations of abstaining from the gum. And both of them put the side out there so that and then argued the side. And that's how they based, and that's how the marketing was based around how they would get people to chew gum and how to counteract, kind of like the
David, what are you talking about?
Story you talk about with the Greeks in teaching soulstry and how to talk about it. So these numbers that I'm going to give you, I'll just let you know, one of the articles that was there on Congress.org, a guy by the name of Donnelly, that said it's complicated to give a certain number because the different armed forces, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, they all do use a different system, and they do not collaborate with each other about what it is that's going on. So therefore, they do not follow the same protocol, kind of like what was going on in the British movie about, do they count veterans that have come back to the States or veterans that have gotten out of the war or gotten out of the service? Do they count veterans that are on military standby? Do they? If you kind of get my gist, with that all of the numbers are so distorted with valid information, it's challenging to give an accurate account of that. I will let you know.
So what you're saying, David, if I can interrupt and just see if I get what you're saying. So you're saying that the numbers are purposely clouded so that we can't get a hold of what it means. Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay, cool.
Exactly.
I think we got that one. So what's the bottom line of what you've arrived at as a vet with these numbers? Where does it go? And everybody can work at validating for themselves. I understand that the whole game is let's cloud it, but let's move into what those numbers are. Where does that go?
Okay. Well, on the average right now, there are about 20 veterans that are committing suicide every single day. And that's just the number that's in the service that are active. That are active.
Active servicemen,
that are
20
still
a day?
in the military. Pardon me?
Really? Active in the military today are committing, they're 20 a day committing suicide. My God.
Yep. It's more, there are more veterans that are dying from suicide than there are that are dying in the combat daily. And that
well, I can certainly understand why they'd want to keep that quiet.
No, certainly. You know, that's being a Vietnam veteran, I remember that when I returned, and I was over there in 68, 69, which was really the height of the war, and that's when there was so much dissension between in the Army as well, in the service as well, because there were more protests with veterans that were active in the war, that were in Vietnam. They had to build a jail over there. It was called Long Binh Jail, so to put people into it because of the fact that they wouldn't go out and do what it is that they wanted them to do. And there was lots of craziness that went on. The effect that it's having, not just on those veterans, and if you think about the veterans that are coming back, that they're dealing with these emotions and these feelings, and without the support and the understanding of how to process through it, there are millions of lives that are affected by it. I mean, the divorces, the suicide rates among children of veterans, and it happens, of the abuse, the physical abuse, and the homelessness. You know, 80% of the people that are homeless are veterans. It's like, how is that possible? It doesn't make sense. And the number is continuously growing with all of it. So what to do about it, and the support, what I'm inviting and supporting people to do is, as you said, to do their own work about what it is that comes up. And if anyone is listening, they have a veteran or they know a family of veterans that would like some support and working through this, they can contact me through my email account, davidhayes@yagain.com. And if they're interested in doing some work, if they're wanting to have some conversations around this so that they can get the support, because to me that's where it's all going to really happen. And if you're thinking about doing this, you know, if you know a family and you're concerned about that family, I also invite you to do your work of what it is that comes up around you about even contacting and letting that family know. So and it's getting so bad. It's really almost at an epidemic level. And I use that word just based on my experience and my sense of what it is that's going on. Because here's the biggest problem for people that do not understand about the Iraqi veterans is that they are on call to go back at any time. There are people that are doing 1, 2, 3, and 4 tours over there, which in Vietnam there were lots of people that did more than one tour. However, they did it voluntarily. And I know lots of veterans that the reason that they did it voluntarily was because the fact that they did not live in a society that they had to go back to that same thing, which is what's going on with the Saudi vet. The problem of it is, though, is all the emotional things that are coming up, they have no way of resolving that, and so they go back. And they're being forced back as well, too. So that's what I've got to comment about. And if there's some questions in the chat room or some thoughts that other people have, it's such a broad area. It's such an important area, and I could talk about it in a lot of different ways, and I really would like to hear from some people to see what their thoughts are and what they would like to do with it.
James, do we have any callers on the line? Any conversation in the chat room? No callers, no conversation in the chat room, David.
Okay. Well, let me let you know one thing as well, too, that the veterans that are looking to even get the help, that it's taking the VA anywhere from 3 to 4 months in order to get the people in there. And in a 6-month period, there were 1,400 veterans that committed suicide waiting to get in to get help. 1,400 of them committed suicide while they were on the waiting list. And the thing is that most of not all, and a lot of the solution to this is to drug them. And there was a article about that the VA was contacting 32,000 veterans that they've assisted because of the fact that they've been giving this drug that now has been associated with suicide, with accelerating it. And so that was part of the solution to it, and they needed to notify them. And incidentally, these numbers that we're talking about the veterans committing suicide, the VA keeps track of it as well. And the number that I gave you a couple of weeks ago, about 16 to 17 a day are committing that. Those veterans are the only ones that are connected with the VA. And 3/4 of the veterans that come back do not contact the VA. So if you just do the math and you just take a look and see what it is that's going on. And I know that there are a lot of veterans out there that came back and they adjusted pretty well and got back into the society and were, quote, a productive, unquote, citizen. And I know lots of them from my era, and that they are now dealing with the issues that they said then there was no issues. And this has been 40-something years ago. So it doesn't go away.
Right. So then what you're saying is that 20 per day in the active military committing suicide, 1,400 of those waiting for entry into a VA facility for support committed suicide. Do you have numbers, David, on how many vets who are not in the service have committed suicide since returning? Who've exited the service?
That are not. No, see, where that number would come from is from the VA, and the only way that the VA knows about it is if they come into that. So the ones that have, it's like the number that I was giving you about the number of them that committed suicide. That was more than what they're doing a day. That doesn't count the veterans that have come back that have gotten out of. That's just the ones that are still there, still in the service. The only way that they can track the other ones, or one of the ways that they track the other ones, is when the people go to the VA. But the problem of it is 3/4 of them never go to the VA. So those figures are only showing. Go ahead.
So for the ones who go to the VA, what are the suicide numbers? What are the suicide numbers there? And the reason I'm interested in this, let me just share this with our audience. The reason I'm interested in this is because what will happen is people will, as they understand these statistics, will get some idea of what the actual cost of war is. You know, aside from, something that started out to be, I don't know how many $1 billion it was going to be to go to Iraq. Now we're over, I think, $1.3 trillion was the last number that I heard. But that's just money. That's just printed paper. I mean, that actually comes free. That's nothing. All they have to do is run printing presses, which is what they're doing. But to really look at the cost of this, the stresses, what does somebody have to be put through who's a strong, strapping young man with a future and a girlfriend and parents and brothers and sisters. He's an aunt, he's an uncle, she's a niece. What did people who start out in that have to be put through in order to commit suicide? What kinds of hostilities and fears? And, our whole conversation here, if somebody's new to the show, our whole conversation is about how do we reclaim a human life? Our goal is to support the restoring of human life on planet Earth. And it's really easy to establish what human life is. Human life is the active presence of love. All you have to do is hold a newborn child to know what human life is. What do you have to beat into somebody? What do you have to force into somebody? What kind of cult-like tactics have to be used in order to so traumatize someone that out in the field with their buddies, 20 a day of them commit suicide, and then when they come home, and that's the number I'm looking for, David, we know now that, 3/4 of them don't check in with the VA. But in terms of VA statistics, do you know what the numbers are for Vietnam vets that have committed suicide that we know of?
As far as Vietnam vets, I don't know. I know I didn't check that. And again, the thing of it is, Michael, is that the number that is being given to people is not only based on the number of people that contacted the VA.
I understand that.
Only 3/4.
So what is that number? What is that number? So now we know we can multiply it by 4. But what is that number? What does that look like?
Well, there's 16 to 17 a day that are back here that are connected with the VA that are committing suicide.
Okay.
That
so
20
in the service.
That 20 was just that. Right. That 20 was just the number of the people that are in the service.
Active service. Right. I understand. So 20 in the service, 16 to 17 a day.
17. Right.
Of Iraqi vets.
Yep.
But we or the Middle Eastern thing that's going on.
Right.
But we don't have any numbers from what's happened to Vietnam vets.
Oh, no, because that's become no. I don't have that. The last that I heard of it, this was back in 2003, 2004, was over 200,000 confirmed. Now that was my story as I've told it. That what really got me, and please for the audience to understand that most veterans do not know that they really have an issue, or they won't talk about it if they do have an issue. For 20-some-odd years. I saw that there was nothing wrong with it. I actually was going to a veterans meeting in Nashville, Tennessee called Base Camp, and I was in a group of Vietnam veterans, and quite frankly, I was sitting there and I was looking at them and I was going, wow, what a bunch of losers. What the hell is the problem with them? They really do have a problem. I don't even know why I'm here. I don't have a problem. And the truth of it is that I felt that I did my part, and I had no idea why I was doing the behaviors that I was doing. And come to find out, and in this particular meeting there was a fellow by the name of Mike Rogers that gave that statistic then, and this was back in 1986, that there had been over 50,000 Vietnam veterans that had committed suicide. Now, there were almost 60,000 that had lost their lives in the war, and that was only the ones that were confirmed by the VA, through the VA. I didn't know, that doesn't count the ones that went off, or there were drug overdoses, or there are alcohol-related issues and problems and stuff. People got to realize, there's more that goes on. It isn't the one little thing that did it. It's the combination of it, and then they do that. But the biggest reason of it is because of their military training. That's my projection of it. Yes, I carried a lot of programs and issues in my life from generation to generation by actively going into the military, by actively participating in killings and being threatened with life. That triggers what I think you would call, Michael, like in the DNA, that it's that structure that's in there that then gets activated. And once that gets activated, there's the challenge. It's not like that, it's like we carry all of these things, but if we don't have the proper things in us in order to balance that, then it doesn't work. Kind of like the program the other night with Brzezinski, and he was talking about the cells that we need in order to combat cancer. I think, and I'm paraphrasing with the way and the way that I saw it was that he said we all have these cancer cells in our body. We just have the other ones that take care of it. We don't have enough of it. But once the things get resonated, once that it gets triggered, and then it's actively going, there has to be something major done in order to counteract that. And if it doesn't, it continues to grow. Again, this is my projection of it.
Right.
That's how I see it.
When you talked about, the vets that came back and adapted, I would offer that because war has become so horrific, I know that the Vietnam vets that I've worked with since one of the last 4 decades, rare is the Vietnam vet that I have worked with who's still in the marriage that they were in when they left for Vietnam. So coming back and adapting well, I would offer is probably a misnomer. I think that the majority, and I don't have any statistics on that, but I would think that the majority, from my experience with Vietnam vets, were in such trauma and created such trauma within the relationships. Their relationships ended. I've seen lots of created other relationships that, because they acquired the tools, were able to, function reasonably well. And many who have created a whole string and series of relationships, one trauma after another, after another, after another. And, our reason for having this conversation is to get each of us to recognize what it is in us that causes us to function as non-humans. And as we recognize that the structuring, if you want to see what being trained to go kill people looks like, get a copy of the movie Straight Metal Jacket, and once again, have a stack of worksheets with you, and everything that's unlike love that comes up in you, start to remove it. This, I think, would be an awesome contribution and way to honor vets. Get a copy of the movie Straight Metal Jacket. Sit and watch it until you notice yourself holding your breath and something less than love comes up in you, some form of hostility or fear, and forgive, and forgive, and forgive. If each of us took that movie and started to work with forgiving in us the pain, the fear, the rage, the grief, the outrage that's there, and to work through that, I think we would find an awesome shift in the energy on the planet toward healing. And Tim, I know you've done a lot of work with vets over the years and veteran organizations. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments at this point.
Well, I can certainly echo everything that David has said. I know of somebody currently who's working in a military base, and they're trying to scramble to put together programs to stem the tide of these suicides. And she's reporting to me about a particular program that they have her and some other people going all around to all of the different offices and to try and hit anybody who works with the vets to educate them about a simple technique to at least identify, talk about it sooner, identify and refer people sooner. So it's question, it's QUI or something like that, or QUR, to refer, question something and refer. And then the other thing I would comment on is that over the years of my working with Vietnam veterans, it's a conservative estimate that they have an average of 4 marriages. 5 and 6 are not unheard of. And it's rare that I run into somebody who's on their second or third marriage when they're a Vietnam veteran. So, again, I just echo what David is saying and support us all in doing our own work, because that's something we can directly influence.
And may I, thank you, Tim, and may I add that one of the things, let me fix my phone here. So one of the issues that was a major issue when Vietnam veterans came back was that they were separated from society in a lot of ways. That people, I'm going to use the word civilian, the civilians and the family members had no idea how to interact with the veterans that were returning. And how to talk with them, and most people have this sense of what it is that I'm talking about. And so that's why it's so important to do what Michael is asking, is that whatever issues that it is that comes up around you, of this, that you do your forgiveness work. Because one of the things from my experience when people would talk about the Vietnam veterans, there were only two reactions. There were two major reactions that went with it. One was this real defensiveness, and one of them was the veteran being defensive about defending what it is that they did, and the other was that they were baby killers and murderers and so forth. Because of the issues that people had that came up for them, then they weren't able to hold the space while veterans dealing with it as well. So that's why it's both people, it's both parties to introduce someone to this program that Michael is teaching is one thing, and for you to do your work around it, for anyone to do their work around it, really support the veteran in taking that step, because if not, they're very good at hiding. It just is what Tim was talking about in relationships, that relationships will just end. And you're right, Tim, that statistic about the average is 4, that's conservative, as you said, about a lot of Vietnam veterans.
I also had the opportunity. I had the opportunity about a month and a half ago, to be on the panel discussing the movie War Torn, which is an HBO movie that covers the history of post-traumatic stress disorder and all of the things it's been called since 1861 in the Civil War all the way through 2010. And all of the things we're talking about were showing up at that VFW hall in Naperville, Illinois. People were traumatized. They watched the movie. They got re-traumatized. They talked about how difficult it is to get their friends and family to admit there's a problem. They talked about the different veterans they know who have been suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder from their first tour of duty, and they're going back for their third and fourth tour of duty. So it's an extraordinarily pervasive problem, and I'm just grateful for the work like Michael putting on this internet show and the tools he has, and the tools we have for getting these tools to more people, the communication. And I would like to help celebrate, thank you, Michael and David, for your efforts to keep this word going out there, and again, just encourage us to do the work on what gets stirred up inside of us when we watch these movies or we hear discussions like the one we're having today.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. And I would like to read something. I just put it out in the chat room. This is actually an article that was written by Penny Coleman, who is a widow of a Vietnam vet who killed himself, and she's also the author of a book. And this was back in 2007, so I'm sure the numbers have changed. But she says, earlier this year, so this is in 2007, using the clout that only major broadcast networks seem capable of mustering, CBS News contacted the governments of all 50 states requesting their official records of death by suicide going back 12 years. they heard back from 45 of the 50 states. And I'll skip part of the discussion. They discovered that in 2005 alone, and remember this is just 45 states, that there were at least 6,256 veteran suicides. That's 120 every week for 1 year and an average of 17 a day, which is what David was saying. She says, as the widow of a Vietnam vet who killed himself after coming home, and as the author of a book for which I have interviewed dozens of other women who also lost their husbands or sons or fathers to post-traumatic stress disorder and a suicide in the aftermath of the war in Vietnam, I am deeply grateful to CBS for undertaking this long overdue investigation. And then she goes on down and says, the administration is good about melting hard numbers on their tongues like communion wafers. Since the new wars began, in spite of a continuous flood of alarming reports, the Department of Defense has managed to keep what has clearly become an epidemic of death beneath the radar of public awareness by systematically concealing statistics about soldier suicides. And she goes on down and talks about how the ones that are still in service, that they will actually classify them as accidental non-combat deaths instead of outright saying that the soldier committed suicide. And you can go on out and read the rest of that article, but it definitely, validates everything that you've been saying there. But one of the things that I really wanted to point out is it says that post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms lie dormant for decades. And I'm catching the feedback on your phone, I think, that it lies dormant for decades, and then once it's triggered, that it all comes right back up in their face. And then so a lot of suicides and things happen years after they've come back. So that's another reason why it's so important to keep doing your work and working through this to get rid of the triggers as they come up instead of taking that drastic measure.
Well, and let me just add for anybody that's on the show and maybe is a little confused about why are we talking about this. Let's listen to Einstein for a minute. Here's what he says. He says, if you think that you are separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. This trauma that is being inflicted upon our world and that people are participating in, either voluntarily or involuntarily, is an energy that impacts us all. Every one of us that holds any form of hostility or fear on an energetic level contributes to, intensifies, and amplifies this happening on the earth. We're all participants. Everyone who holds any form of hostility or fear is a supporter of war. The reason why I initiated on Memorial Day a different way of celebrating than, let's take a day off and go out and get drunk and cook hamburgers. The reason that I initiated a different way of celebrating, at least through this show, Memorial Day, and carrying on that celebration is because we are contributors who hold any form of hostility around the issue of war or around any issue. And once we realize that, then when we can get a critical mass of people who will step in and do the internal work required. Now, if you're called to do something externally about this, awesome. If you're called to contact your congressman, if you're called to contact your senator, if you're called, whatever you're called to do, awesome on the external. But every one of us, if you don't know it, 60 cents of every dollar that you send to the federal government pays for a war machine. And actually the numbers with what's going on now may be far higher than that. This goes back a few years ago. So if you're called to do something externally, wonderful, that's up to you. But I'm inviting you to look at the internal dynamic in yourself. And what we need to do to bring healing to this is I need to bring my human life. Again, what is a human life? Hold a newborn, you know what it is. It is the active presence of love. I need to bring the active presence of love of my humanness to bear on this drama and trauma. And I can't do that if I don't work through my own drama and trauma. And that's part of the game that keeps us. It's almost like classic Satanism. Really, it is. Because the trauma is so pervasive and so many people are swimming in it daily even though they rage against war, they're contributors. There's an awesome scene in the Star Wars movie which demonstrates a very powerful principle if you haven't seen it. And in Star Wars, you'll remember that, Luke Skywalker's the good guy and, Darth Vader's the bad guy, and Darth Vader has an overlord who controls and runs his life. And so Vader draws Luke Skywalker, the good guy, in and then turns him over to his overlord. And the overlord invites him into this little, room where he has this map of the galaxies on the wall. And he explains to Luke, see that star way over there, like way out somewhere in the galaxy? We know where all your friends are. They're on that star. And he accurately knows where they are. And he says to Luke, and I've invited you here to watch us kill them, to blow that star up. And, the overlord purposely leaves his lightsaber there, his weapon there, available for Luke. And then he turns to Luke and he taunts him. And he says, go ahead, hate me. Go ahead, kill me. What this overlord wants to do is to shift Luke to the dark side. What he wants Luke to do is to go into hatred, fear, anger, rage. If we're in hatred, fear, anger, or rage about anything, then we are energetic contributors in this one body that we inhabit. And once again, if you can't conceive of that, let's just listen once again to Einstein. On such things, pardon me, that's a different quote. If you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. Everything that every one of us does impacts every other one of us. Individuation does not mean separation, which, is kind of like the good news and the bad news. That means that every insane mind on an energetic level, if you're in resonance with it, impacts you. And the good news is that you can impact them. And so each one that chooses to undo their own hostility and fear and bring the active presence of love forward into whatever's going on in the world literally shifts the energy for the whole planet. Because the higher, in the immediate area, the lower energy, the hostility, the rage, the fear is explosive, and it seems to have a lot of power. But the real penetrating power is in the active presence of love. And the active presence of love dissolves. It takes apart the rage, the fear, the hostility, the grief, and the pain. That's why the forgiveness worksheet, if you're not familiar with the forgiveness process that we're teaching, please go to www.whyagain.com. On the right-hand side of the page, there's a link that says Download Worksheets. Please go to the Download Worksheets link, and the first two links under that section, the first one is an explanation of how to forgive. Nothing to do with letting other people off the hook because of the trauma in you. It's about getting rid of the trauma in you. The second link is the actual worksheet. So there's an explanation and there's the actual worksheet. Please download those links. Sit down and watch that movie, the one that Tim's talking about, perhaps War Torn, and sit down and watch Straight Metal Jacket and begin to work around these issues. Do you really want to honor veterans? We've got a double-speak system that says, we're so thankful for our veterans, but I don't think we have to say much more than has already been said about, why are two-thirds of veterans or three-quarters of veterans not checking in with the VA? Because it's just another trauma. I have a friend in South Florida, and I was down there a few months ago with him, on the west coast of Florida, and he's a Vietnam vet, Agent Orange. He was in Korea as well. Pardon me, not Vietnam, Korea. And he had just, as David was saying, he just, ignored the whole thing until it became such a stress in his life that he had to do something. So he finally went into the VA system. And when I would be there, he would say, Michael, would you come with me? Now, this guy is a pretty big guy, pretty tough guy, And I wouldn't want to, wrestle with him or argue with him because he'd take me apart in 30 seconds. But he's in tears when he thinks about going to the VA. He cracks, he breaks, that post-traumatic stress that he isn't able to handle. So I go to the VA with him, and I literally sit there and hold his hand to support him in breathing and moving through this trauma that has been inflicted. And that trauma inflicted on one person on the planet is inflicted on all of us. And that means that all of us, if we choose to do our work, if we choose to bring the active presence of love to bear, and begin the healing of that trauma in ourselves. And there's a wonderful line in the Course in Miracles that says, when you are healed, you are never healed alone. You literally open the energy window. That's why we're celebrating. That's why we're doing this show today, once again, in celebration of Memorial Day, to honor these men and women and the children of these men and women who have been forced to murder, who have been murdered themselves, who have been injured, who have been maimed. It's time for us to start healing. It's time for us to take healing to another level, individually and collectively.
Michael, there was a question in the chat room about somebody who's doing 5 worksheets a day and is having some issues with, it sounds like the 12-item worksheet, numbers 6 and 9, where you set a goal and then in step 9 you cancel the goal. Maybe you could address the issue of having a goal for somebody else, establishing a loving, positive goal, and then canceling it, and the reason for that.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to do that. So, and we're really talking about a whole. I mean, that's the core of forgiveness, and it's a major process to understand how forgiveness works. We've been taught in this culture a lie, and the lie is, you did something terrible that caused all this pain inside of me, but it's okay, I'll forgive you. And when I let you off the hook, our culture says, we've now forgiven. I would offer you have done zero forgiving if you're talking about forgiving somebody else for what's going on inside of you. The way and the reason it's become letting other people off the hook is because we deny, the very conversation, that David introduced of most vets don't, we don't have a problem, I don't have a problem. That's called denial. And what happens when we deny is we dissociate from the very thing that we most need to face and deal with. So we create an actual unconscious condition, a hidden part of the mind that is not available to us. And out of that part of the mind, if you go to the ancient scriptures where they understood all of this precisely, they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. They were saying, take care of the dissociated mind. There was no such concept of this until just the last few decades. Freud got a Nobel Prize for discovering the unconscious. Freud no more discovered the unconscious than fly in the air. The Aramaic culture, the Aramaic language expressed the unconscious thousands of years ago. They understood it perfectly. So when we deny and dissociate from something, when we don't have the ability to contact that part of ourselves, then out of that hidden part of the self, we set up over and over what it is that we see in the world and the effects that we produce. The forgiveness process is not about letting others off the hook, but it's how you go inside yourself and crack that dissociated mind. If you can't crack the dissociated mind, you can't change its content. Literally, while you're in a dissociated state, you can make new choices. You can critically think about what's in your dissociated mind. You can wander about it. You can hope about it. You can talk about it. You can pray about it until you crack the unconscious, the dissociated mind. You're not going to change its content. So what Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago about how to do that, in the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag, and it literally translates to cancel. Now, you can't cancel that other person. You can't cancel yourself. But here's what you can do. You'll notice that whenever you have an upset towards someone, You know, let's say you're walking down the street and there's a crowd of 100 people that you walk by, and you don't know anybody in that crowd. Chances are there's no upset in walking by that crowd, unless you see the guy that, let's say, maybe has the kind of goatee that you hated because a friend of yours who really did you dirt decades ago, did a behavior that really you felt harmed you. So if you walk by that person and you look at them and you have this disturbance inside of you, that disturbance, I'd offer, is a contributor to war. It's an energy that accumulates in massive numbers of people and produces the ultimate thing called war. Now, why, when I see that person who has that goatee, would I have disturbance about it? Well, one, I have disturbance in me, but what brings that disturbance forward? Because I have a goal that person be different. I'd like that guy to be clean-shaven or have a full beard so that I don't have to face what's inside of me. So when I load a goal in my mind that links to my hostility or fear, I'm linking to something that's in my dissociated mind through it, and I'll project that hostility and fear into my brain's image of that other person. So let's say it's the person who has the goatee just like the one I didn't like decades ago. I have hostility or fear in me, and I walk by that guy, and, I'm not going to interact with him. I'm not going to talk to him. He's not going to talk to me. But I walk by, and I get this little ripple of a sneer at him. So I'm pointing my hostility or fear at him, my judgment at him, and I don't have a clue why. I don't even remember that guy 3 decades ago that did that terrible thing to me. But the fact that I hold a goal that accesses hostility and fear is a way that my mind shows me what it is that I need to work through. The way that I crack the dissociated mind is by canceling the goal. And here's what happens. When I load a goal into my mind, there's some interesting Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of information that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits of information. 10,000 brain cells fire, 9 bits of data. So there's a whole lot of unconscious data there, a whole lot of dissociated data when I look through my 9-bit mind. And so my 9-bit mind shows me a picture of this person, and I feel some kind of wrinkle of disturbance. But I'm just looking at a little tiny time frame, or a little tiny bit of information when I see this body. I'll call this person who has the goatee that I don't like. When I cancel the goal, what happens is that collapses the projection from the dissociated mind. It collapses what occupies my 9-bit mind, and I get to go directly now. I've just cracked open the dissociated state. I get to go directly to my dissociated content. What happens when people start to do these worksheets, invariably, is that this person all of a sudden gets in touch with something they didn't know about themselves. And that something is what's hidden in the dissociated mind. The majority of people will say things like, wow, I didn't realize that was there. We worked with a man yesterday who's a physician, several months ago, who's a physician. And part of his work is forgiveness with people. And it's the Greek idea of forgiveness. Well, I'll let them off the hook. You got to let people off the hook. And so we walked him through the forgiveness process. And this is a really wonderful man, really wonderful healer. He helps a lot of people, gentle soul. And when we walked him through the forgiveness process over a simple little issue in his life, he was just aghast at how much rage there was under his behavior that he wasn't in touch with. And so what happens is the dissociated mind, through forgiveness, you get to crack, you get to go directly into relationship with it. And there's a practice in the worksheet, if you'll notice it's step 4. And in 40 years of doing this work, about 20 years ago, I kind of did an assessment of, in my experience, what was it that produced healing? What was the bottom line? Was it some big psychotherapeutic process? Was it, what was it that produced the energy shift and the healing? And what I recognized was that what you had to do, or what the common link was the dissociated mind was cracked, something came to awareness that had previously been hidden, and love was present. A human life, the active presence of love was there. When the active presence of love is there, and something peeks its head up out of the dissociated mind, there's an instant shift in energy and healing happens. So why do you cancel your goal? Which seems totally, completely backward. But then the mind has got it totally, completely backward. You'll notice if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. Your upset, your disturbance is about you. But what did the average person say? Well, he made me angry. He made me sad. He made me afraid. He really frightened me. Well, excuse me, that anger, sadness, and fright is something in your tissue structure. Now, if you deny it, you can pretend it's everybody else, and you'll never resolve it. But if you really want to be a contributor to healing the dynamic of war on the planet, if you really want to heal yourself, you've got to take responsibility. Notice right now when you're saying, you made me angry, you made me afraid, you've got it all backward. And it's going to take a backward tool to clean it up. This brilliant mind 2,000 years ago showed us exactly how to do it in Aramaic. It was translated into Greek and it disappeared. It became turned backwards again. Well, we'll just let them off. We'll forgive them. All the people who say, they hear I'm going to do a forgiveness workshop, they're like, well, why is this happening to me? And they're like, well, I don't need to do that. I've already forgiven everybody, my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my kids, my parents, my children, my former spouse, my present. I've even forgiven my future spouses. And what I know by that language is that person has done zero forgiveness work today. No forgiveness work if you're pardoning people. And pardoning is a nice thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that you don't pardon. If somebody's off the hook, off base, let them off the hook. That's a nice thing to do. But if what they do resonates some form of hostility or fear in you, that's your opportunity to remove that from you. But you don't know it because your mind is showing that it belongs to them and that they did it to you. Human life does not show up in our world. Actual human beingness does not show up as long as we're in the game of blaming everybody else for what's going on in us. When I say you made me, I'm saying that I did not create what's happening inside of me. I am not the one who set this up. And while I'm locked in that position, what shows up is my hostility or fear. And so we become actually human only when we cease to blame others. What does blaming others mean? Blaming another, here's a simple definition. If you talk about somebody else when you're in upset, you're blaming something else. And your upset is not healable in that state, and therefore the active presence of love is in you. Step 4 in the worksheet calls upon the active presence of love. It is a practice that we suggest you do on a daily basis. And as you get to the active presence of love and you hold that presence and you cancel your goal, to collapse the dissociated mind and expose that hidden material to love. And a transmutation of energy happens. A shift in energy inside of you happens. And you siphon off a little bit of the energy that contributes to war. If we can get a critical mass of people who are willing to do that, we will change what's happening on planet Earth totally and completely. And we will inspire, because we function as love, those who currently don't know it's possible to start to shift. And as they shift, we set up the environment where more and more places on the planet, the conversation about love will happen. It will come forward into our world. Leadership will move into love, and parenting will move into love. The war machine will move into love. The whole game's going to change. And we'll all get ready to have the best year yet of our eternal lives. And we are delighted that you're here to share with us, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Blessings.
Thank you for listening to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife Jeannie, who present the internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeannie are here every Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeannie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyagain.com.